Chapter 12. When the gigantic doors on the far side of the throne room swung wide and a line of finely dressed women and men walked in, a single thought entered Janiah's mind. At last! By custom, people from throughout the land gathered in the throne room at Juderia Tower the last day of every week to petition the reigning monarch for assistance that only the royal family could give. Janiah had decided to take Aeon's advice to heart and announced to the royal staff that she would be joining the queen to hear this week's petitions. Watching her mother govern, that was how Janiah would learn to be queen. For the first time, no one argued. Hats in hands, the week's petitioners kept their eyes to the floor as they approached. Atop an oval dais, Queen Sula sat in a grand throne of gold and velvet, her head held high and a friendly, if tight, smile on her lips. In an alcove to her left, her most trusted advisers, scholars from every corner of the monarchy, huddled together, ready to share their wisdom at the queen's request. Janiah sat to her mother's right on a smaller chair. It had been several days since the two had been this close. The princess could hear the queen laboring for each breath. All eyes fixed on the queen, Janiah shifted in her seat and wondered what her mother was waiting for to start the proceedings. A moment later, Sconus shambled into the room. Janiah watched him strut past the petitioners as if he were their sovereign. All regarded him with a curious gaze, but nodded politely in his direction. Sconus's gaze swept past Janiah, not even sparing her a glance, and landed on the queen. He bowed and then moved to the far corner, where he picked at his furs as if looking for mites. He clicked his tongue when he found something and flicked it away in disgust. With Sconus in place, the queen lifted her hand to start the petitions. One by one, the citizens of the monarchy approached the dais. "The summer was kind to me, your majesty," the first petitioner, a stout farmer with bushy eyebrows and an even bushier beard, said. "I was gifted with the birth of many new cattle, but now I don't have enough grain to feed them." The queen listened carefully to the man's plea. "I congratulate you on a plentiful year. You do the monarchy credit. I grant you whatever grain you may need from the royal silos." The next petitioner, a tall stick of a man with droopy shoulders, went to one knee before the throne. "Your Majesty," he said, "I am but a humble exchequer of the village of Belshire. I am in love with the town's apothecary, but I worry I am not worthy of his affections. Do I dare tell him how I feel? Or should I seek a mate within my station?" Queen Sula did not take a moment to consider. "The mate you seek should be the one who fills your heart," she said immediately. "Let no station in life create a barrier that dulls the joyful pleas of your desperate desires." These were the petitions, the need for sage advice, that worried Janiah the most. When the queen spoke, it was with calming assurance. Everyone knew that what she said was true. How would Janiah advise the people who asked for her help, especially when the man who was supposed to be teaching her was currently in the corner, comparing the hair on his beard to the furs on his chest? Janiah watched all morning as her mother carefully listened to each appeal, granting what was in her power to grant, which was nearly everything, and offered wisdom to those in need. Sconus cleared his gravelly throat when the final petitioner, a portly woman with a kind face, approached. The queen arched an eyebrow at the tutor and then gently touched her daughter's arm. "The queen assent will hear the final petition," the queen declared in a strong, clear voice. Janiah bit the insides of her cheeks. She wanted to decline. She wanted to cry. She didn't know what she'd say if the woman wanted advice on whether or not she should arrange a marriage between her son and the baker's daughter. She didn't have that sort of wisdom. As far as she knew, she didn't have any wisdom. "Now that you are queen assent," the queen reminded her softly, "your word is law. Take your time. Measure your thoughts." The petitioner bowed her head. Janiah could feel the stares of everyone in the room. They inched over her flesh like scorpions searching for prey. "Please ask me for something I can grant," Janiah begged silently. "Wheat from our silos, sugar from our larder, anything simple." On the outside, she did as she'd watched her mother do since the first petitioner. She sat up straight, lifted her chin as if she'd done this 100 times before, and nodded for the woman to begin. "My family farms the orchards to the south of the river, your Majesty." "No!" Janaya jumped at the sharp voice. All eyes turned to Sconus, who took a single step forward. "The proper address," he said icily, "is Your Highness. Princess Janaya cannot be addressed as Your Majesty until she is truly queen." The farmer was startled by the sharp rebuke. Janaya felt embarrassed for her. What Sconus had said was true, but the woman had made a simple mistake, surely not worthy of this hard of a tone. She glanced to see if her mother would scold the tutor, but the queen remained silent. Janaya turned back to the farmer and smiled. "Please continue," she said, and then added very pointedly, "There will be no more interruptions." The farmer composed herself and started again. "As you know, Your Highness," the woman said, "every spring we welcome the arrival of the ravens that nest in our orchards. They eat the insects and other vermin that would otherwise destroy the orchard's bountiful harvest of fruit. But this year a small family of ruby wings has taken to nesting in the orchards as well. Their bright color attracts predators that swoop in and eat the ravens. Because all in the monarchy is yours, Queen Assent, we respectfully ask permission to protect the ravens." Janaya pretended to be considering very carefully. Really, she was trying not to throw up. She quietly drew air in between her teeth. She wanted to be fair. She glanced over to the queen's advisers, who stood at the ready. The queen had not once consulted them throughout the morning of requests, but surely she, the Queen Assent, could be allowed to ask others their advice when she was so new at this. "Reeve Ellsworth," the princess said, "what do you know of the ruby wings?" An elderly man with a balding pate stepped forward from the alcove. Each of the Reeves was charged with having a thorough understanding of some aspect of the monarchy. As Reeve of Nature, Ellsworth had knowledge second to none to all the plants and animals throughout the land. "They are clever birds," the Reeve said. "Once nested, they are not quick to move. Do you see a solution?" The man nodded. "There are several ways to tend to the ruby wings, Your Highness. Some are simple, others are difficult. Some are fast, and some will take time." "Such as?" Janaya asked. "Ruby wings usually nest in Syracuse Valley," the Reeve said. "Care could be taken to relocate this brood so they can be among their own kind. The valley's red-leaf trees will provide them shelter from predators." "Or perhaps the ruby wings could be sold," said Reeve Wayne, the bright-faced woman who served as Reeve of Culture. "The milliners who live in the north keep ruby wings as pets. They spoil them with fat worms and artisan water, and sometimes use their feathers in hat-making." Janaya listened and nodded. "These are fair solutions," he said. Then she turned to the petitioner. "Do you agree?" The woman seemed stunned that she was being consulted. "All I ask, Your Highness, is that the solution be expedient and executed with as little toil as possible, so as not to disrupt the harvesting. Every day the ruby wings live in the trees, ravens are dying, and the harvest is in danger." Janaya watched her mother from the corner of her eye, searching for any sort of guidance, but the queen remained expressionless. Janaya was on her own. Clearly, much was at stake. The plentiful ravens were dying. The tree's fruit would be ruined without the ravens to eat the insects that spoiled the harvest. Although it would inconvenience the ruby wings to relocate them, it was clearly for the greater good. The princess said to the farmer, "You may proceed as you see fit, doing whatever is swiftest and simplest to protect the ravens from being eaten." The farmer thanked Janaya. The queen's herald blew a horn, and the petitioners left. "Let it be known," the queen whispered to her steward, "that this was the last audience I will grant. No more petitions will be heard until Janaya is queen." When the throne room had emptied, Janaya kissed her mother good night and left her to her bedchambers. "Tonight at sundown," Sconus said, appearing out of nowhere and falling into step at the princess's side, "I want you to go to Triathus Tower." Triathus was the second tallest spire after Lith. It was used as a watchtower. Every window contained a telescope from which all corners of the monarchy could be viewed. Keep your eyes in the orchard. You will see the people acting on the Queen Assent's will. Something warm tickled Janaya's stomach. She hadn't thought of that. She had made a royal declaration, and people were going to act on it. "Your word is law," her mother had said. This would be the way things would be from now on. She could make a difference. "And what do you think of your third lesson?" Sconus asked Janaya. "Third lesson?" Scotus hadn't said a word throughout the audience, except to correct the farmer. It hadn't even been his idea for her to observe the petitions. But when she thought about it, she had learned it was important to consider the needs of the multitudes over the needs of a handful. That would no doubt guide her in future petitions. "I think," Janiah said smoothly, "I should like more lessons like that." Scotus chuckled. "Perhaps some day someone will do that for you. But remember, I promised you just 3 lessons. You will set the 4th and final lesson yourself. I will stay only until you have finished." The tutor nodded respectfully. Then he turned and made for the tower's exit. At sundown, Janiah went to the top of the Triathis Tower, as Scotus had instructed. She turned the largest telescope to the south until the lens fell on the orchards. She watched as a slim man approached the largest tree with ginger steps. He raised a pole and tapped it fiercely on the lower branches. The orchard seemed to explode. What Janiah had believed to be a thicket of leaves was in reality a flock of ravens that burst forward from the tree's bare branches. The sky filled with the blackbirds, blotting out the glowing horizon like a funeral shroud. In the turmoil of birds flying everywhere, Janiah spotted 4 flashes of scarlet. The ruby wings, which looked exactly like the ravens, but for the shiny red feathers on their wings, raced to keep up with their darkened brethren. And just as quickly as it had taken flight, the ruby wings fell to the ground, one by one. Janiah gasped. She twisted the end of the telescope, and the distant image came into sharper focus. The birds lay at the base of the tree, a single arrow through each of their chests. The ravens continued untouched until they became one with the night sky. 4 archers emerged from the nearby bushes, clapping one another on the back and sharing congratulations on their marksmanship. The Queen's advisers had said there were several options. They hadn't mentioned that one option. The one the farmer had chosen was killing the birds. "That's not what I meant," Janiah whispered. But it's what she'd said. She'd given the woman permission to take care of the problem, and that was what the woman had done. She sacrificed a few ruby wings for the many ravens in the name of doing what was easiest. The assurance Janiah had felt earlier, the knowledge that she had done the right thing, slipped away. Now she was afraid. She didn't want to speak ever again. The power she wielded was too much. For once she saw just how much what she said mattered. The word is law. That's the end of chapter 12.